Hello and welcome everyone to Powerful Nothing, a Magic the Gathering podcast. I'm your host Dan, better known on the internet as TooSweetMTG, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host James. How's it going, dude?
Oh, what is up? Yeah, pretty good. Excited for our episode today.
Yeah, awesome. Worth mentioning, we're not alone today. We are in fact joined by a very special guest. Today, we're joined by Andreas Petersen, better known on the internet as ecobaronenMTG. Andreas, welcome. Great to have you here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. First of all, that's a pleasure. It's I have high expectations for my my evening today. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Looking forward for today's chat. So before we kind of kick off, just to kind of set the groundwork a little bit, Andreas. So for those not aware, tell us a bit about yourself. Kind of how did it all begin? How did you get into Magic? All that good stuff.
Yeah. So let's rewind 20 years. I played the Pokemon TCG as a young teenager. I was lucky to win my nationals and qualify for Worlds, so I went to Seattle in 2002. And over there, I played the tournament. Didn't go very well. Then I went to a card shop called Card House, and that's where I bought my first Magic card. And since then, I've played 0 Pokemon tournaments, and I've played Magic tournaments every week. So here we are, 22 years down the line, and I'm still going strong. I love Magic, mostly Eternal formats. I love like the combination of old cards, like to combo them with new cards. I think that's just perfect, like the nostalgia, the competitiveness. So definitely that combination is my favorite when it comes to Magic.
No, fantastic. Yeah. So the plan for today is we're going to be talking about the current state of Cube in 2024 and touching a little bit on kind of the competitive Cube scene. So specifically on cubing, Andreas, what got you into Cube in the first place? And do you actually remember like the first Cube you drafted?
I think it must have been some kind of Magic Online iteration, maybe like 10 years ago. And it was just the fact that, I can have a Black Lotus, but I can also have whatever the newest Mythic Haymaker from Standard is. And I can have those in the same deck. That just, since Magic is such a historical game, I think that was just why I got interested in it in the first place. And then once you start dip into the Cube, it's like you can never it's not a game you can complete. Like let's say you play Zelda or whatever on your Nintendo, you can complete it, but with Magic it just keeps going. And I feel like it's just the same with Cube, to be honest. And still trying to do the riddle to this day.
Fantastic. No, nice. And yeah, is it mainly online Cube you play? Like, is it mainly like the Mega Cube, or do you get much of a chance to play in paper as well?
Yeah. So back then, a friend of mine actually, like, we made a proxy Cube, and we just copied the Magic Online one every time there was a new update to it, and then we got like 8 friends together, ate some good food, played a few Cube drafts. But as time went by and people have more responsibilities, etc., it's mostly online for me.
That's fair. Those responsibilities do end up getting in the way at some point, but we'll whenever possible, let's go to the pub and Cube anyway, I say.
Yeah, that's definitely awesome. I did play a Cube for Mox Ruby when I was at Eternal Week in US, actually, just a few months ago. So
that's spicy.
Yeah, pretty cool. I got to play with some top players. I think Nathan Stoyer ended up taking down the Mox Ruby. That's not bad for a day's work.
Yeah, seems like a good day out. There's not a lot he doesn't win at the moment, I think.
That's true.
I think the most anyone's ever won from winning my Cube is a pint. So
no, a Mox Ruby is worth X amount of dollars, but the great company is priceless.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, exactly. Fantastic. Well, let's move on to one of our first topics of the day. So let's chat about the state of Cube. So as someone obviously who plays a lot of Cube, I'd like to get your thoughts on the state of Cube at the moment as we come into spring 2024. Kind of what feels like the biggest change of Cube over the last couple of years is yes, we've seen some very cool synergistic cards printed, but we've also had a lot of one-off super high power level cards. Like I'm thinking like Pitch Elementals from Modern Horizons 2. You've had like the One Ring Orcish Bowmasters like Minsk and Boo, and of course like the Initiative being printed. Like how do you think these super impactful kind of one-off cards or more individual cards have affected Cube, and do you kind of see these as positives?
So yeah, regarding the positives or negatives, I think that's just a matter of taste. It's like some people like chocolate, some people don't. I guess most people do, but maybe that's a bad example. But whatever, a song on the radio, I think it's a great one. You don't like it. Like for me, I usually try and adapt to these changes. And how I see it, I agree with the power level just in general has just risen through the roof, which basically means that in Cube, in my experience, fair strategies are way better off than they used to be. Because these cards that you just mentioned, they aren't necessarily like Graveyard Broken or Spell-based. I'm going to finish this off with a Brain Freeze or whatever. Like, these are basically making the fair decks able to compete with. Because I remember back in the day, it was like, if you're not storming or playing some kind of reanimator strategy or sneak attack, stuff like that, you're basically doing Vintage Cube wrong. But I think that's the biggest change, actually. That these days, like, a lot of my 3-0s are like bread and butter, cheap interaction, efficient threats, a lot of new cards in it as well, to be honest. That's like a theme, I would say, that the fair decks have gotten way more lucrative to play.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think even like up until a few years ago, it felt like if you weren't doing something very linear or a combo thing, then you could play like a blue control deck, right? But that was like the only fair deck that could really compete.
Yeah, and you would play that to stop the unfair things, basically.
Exactly. Whereas now it feels like, yeah, I've got this Rakdos mid-range deck and I'm really happy about it. You know, that was just a few years ago. It felt like that was something people did the first time they played Cube and then never again because
yeah,
the
stuff
power
like
level was just
black
not that.
white is just like black-white disruptive stuff, or 4-color green powering out some haymakers ahead of schedule. Like, a lot of fair strategies are winning these days.
Yeah, for sure. I think green's a great example, actually, because green used to be just about, like, look at my Kratos behemoth and you're dead. And it feels like now you really, you don't need to put an 8-drop in your deck. Look at my Minsk and Boo, you're dead, right?
Definitely a lot more about the 3, 4s, and 5s than I need to get my Cradle or Natural Order out of Greater Hoof. I agree. It's all the bread and butter stuff has gotten so much better.
Yeah, for sure. I think I saw a Reddit thread recently about that posted their top 50 cube cards, and it wasn't like they were all from either the first 5 years of Magic or the last 5 years of Magic.
Wow. Okay.
I was like, that kind of checks out, actually.
That makes a lot of sense, because when I talk to some friends, the story is usually like the old spells are great and the newer creatures are great. That's like somewhat of a rule of thumb, I would say.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I would imagine that top 50 list. I saw LSV had a top 50 list that I 90% agree with it. So it's like very in line with like how I play Cube, and it's actually a lot of the same stuff going on that you just said. That is some old bangers and some new, just through the roof power level cards.
With some of the new cards, it does feel like that there's almost like a second tier of like power now. Would you agree with that? Kind of like you have a kind of like Empowered Cube. You have your pack 1 pick ones of like your classic Power 9, your Moxen, your Black Lotuses, your Soul Rings, your Mana Crypts. But then below that, there is like a second tier of like Minsk and Boo, and like Orcish Bowmasters. Kind of like these cards are
definitely like Minsk and Boo, Orcish Bowmasters, Fortheolingus, Sheldred. That's like on top of my head the best ones. But then again, I don't necessarily have a top 50. I draft a lot on like experience and instinct, so I can't necessarily tell you, do I like Sheldred more than Orcish Bowmasters? Like, I couldn't necessarily tell you, but great options to have, right? It's a great problem to have if you ever run into it. So
definitely, I kind of because one thing with some of those new cards is that they have either brought about new strategies or have kind of given older cards like new leases of life. I'm thinking specifically kind of like things like Flash in the last couple of years has kind of really kind of come to the fore. Kind of like do you think like specifically with a card like Flash is kind of like cards like Atraxa, like good ETBs are kind of being printed, or kind of like is Flash a card that kind of we should always have been running but have only kind of really realized it in the last year or so?
That's actually a good question. I didn't think about it. So when you think about like somewhat older printings that are good with Flash, I think about the Worldspine Worm. I think about Woodfall Primus. And aside from that, I think it's relatively new, mainly newer printings like Torsten, like Atraxa. Then you can move down and stuff like Itali is reasonable. And then below that, again, we have like Ashen Rider. So maybe on a good day, we can say Flash comboed with 3 cards up until this point. Maybe Sundering Titan as in some matchups, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think it's fair that it didn't see the light of day until now. I think you need like a handful of good cards with Flash for it to make sense.
Yeah, Flash Ashen Rider feels like an acceptable backup, but not like you're really getting paid for putting Flash in your deck.
You need to play like specifically blue-black and have the ability to bring back that Ashen Rider once more for it to be worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, that's when Flash feels insane, right? Is when it's like also just a discard outlet in your reanimator deck that gets you insane value on the way through.
Oh yeah, I've been on the receiving end of that a few times, and did it to the opponent with sneak attack. It's kind of the same. Hit you with this creature, and then I'll do it all over because I play red-black, and I also have reanimation for next turn.
Oh yeah. So we talked about like the new cards having a really big impact and definitely like changed the overall environment of the cube. Which sort of cards do you think have like gone up or down your power level in your estimation from that? Like, is it just the same sort of rough ranking, but take the busted new cards, or have some cards got better and some cards got worse from the existing card pool?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is Library of Alexandria, which at some point was like insanely good when I started playing. Then all of a sudden it was like, oh, the tempo you took off from drawing your extra cards, you could kind of lose the game with 7 cards in hand, and that's bad. But now it feels like with all the like hitch elementals, 1 mana removal spells, whether it's just something like, Flame Slash being added to the cube, Cut Down getting printed, all of the like Portable Hole getting into the cube, like just small stuff where so people just realized, okay, if I trade 1 for 1, it's fine to like play off tempo, because when the dust settles, I have a full grip and the opponent I've grinded them down to dust, right? So Library if you draft around it the right way, that's a card that actually went from LSV. I know he had it like not even in his top 50 like 3 months ago or 6 months ago, but now it's like a top 15 card for him because he kind of figured out how to draft around it. So that's the first card I'm thinking about. Yeah, it's actually a good question. Evasive creatures, maybe. When I play on the draft server, we play with initiative creatures. I don't think they're in the Magic Online cube right now, but once initiative is kind of in the equation, then just random evasive creatures like Baleful Strix, Malcolm, Fairy Mastermind, they just go a lot up in value. So that's the 2 examples I'm thinking about.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because I mean, if people want to just have a bunch of removal spells against the creature decks, but killing the initiative creature doesn't actually help unless you can take the initiative back, right?
Yeah, the initiative is really something that's just that it's very polarized. So I play Vintage on a weekly basis, so I was kind of used to the initiative, but I can see why it's not the most fun mechanic for like a newer player or someone less competitive than me, because the snowball effect is real. Like you'll have some games where there's just no coming back. It's like you're fighting a lost battle, which is not the best feeling to be honest. But when you do beat it, that is the best feeling. So maybe that's the boon.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's the combination of initiative creatures and the busted fast mana as well is quite something in Powered Cube specifically.
Oh no doubt. I don't personally enjoy those. Let's call it none games. Maybe that's too extreme of a term for it. But yeah, generally I like the power. But some games, I want my decisions to matter. I want the game to last more than a few turns. But I guess we can't have it all.
No, definitely. I'm actually in the middle of removing the initiative from my cube. Kind of like it's been in for a year, and it's kind of I just generally found that kind of so my cube is like an unpowered vintage cube, but it just means that initiative are some of the strongest cards in there, and it's I've really enjoyed the games I've played with initiative. Like there's the extra level of kind of like back and forth, similarly to Monarch, kind of like it's an additional resource that kind of you're battling over with your opponent. But I definitely felt it's just made too many games be about it, and kind of like the decks with the initiative have kind of overperformed, I think, possibly because of the initiative.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, and I think no matter how you build your cube, some cards are going to be stronger than the others. If that wasn't the case, then like it wouldn't be no fun to draft it, or like there has to be some. But I can definitely see, it's a matter of taste. Like if you like that fighting for the initiative, awesome. If you don't, you can just remove it, like the Magic Online cube. And the Magic Online cube is also fun to play, so it's fine.
I kind of find that I actually quite like the Monarchy and cube, because it feels like you get a really big advantage. It's worth protecting it. You can have this back and forth that's pretty fun. But you can sometimes win games where your opponent has the Monarchy for like 4 or 5 turns. If you do your combo, you manage to get your combo off and you win anyway, right?
Right.
With initiative, it feels like it just, because instead of accruing value, they're ending the game, right? And it snowballs that little bit quicker.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like growing a creature, throwing a lava axe at your opponent, like that will finish the game faster than just drawing an extra card on each draw step. I can definitely see that.
And I think the library point's really interesting, actually, though. I think part of the thing there, right, is just now it feels like you want in your interactive decks like 6 or 7 creature removal spells. And I think certainly like when I think I probably started playing Vintage Cube a similar time to you, maybe like 8 or 9 years ago. Maybe it felt like you just couldn't have that many creature removal spells in your deck, right? Because it would be blank against too many people.
Yeah, I was like, I want a couple to not get run over, but you can't overload on them. That was like my feeling, at least.
Yeah. You were like, instead of this 1 mana removal spell, I'll have like a Banishing Light because it can kill my opponent's talisman as well, you know?
Big flexibility.
Yeah.
On the topic of kind of like cheap interaction, kind of like we've definitely seen an uptick of like free spells being played in Cube. Kind of like, obviously, I think kind of the pitch elementals kind of getting printed, kind of that was 5 additional cards that kind of majority see a lot of Cube play. But kind of like previously we had cards like Force of Will and Days that saw play, but now kind of like I think the Amigo Vintage Cube has like definitely has like Snuff Out and Pyrokinesis, and they were testing like Contagion as well, kind of like
that's true. That was in last year. Yeah,
like how have you found like the free cards? Because like they generally all have like they are free in terms of mana, but obviously they come with like card disadvantage or something like that. Kind of how have you found that those have affected the way that kind of like people play Cube in the last year or so?
Yeah, it's a great question. It feels like you're playing more like Legacy or Vintage in the fact that when the opponent is tapped out, that doesn't makes it impossible for them to have something. It just like minimizes the amount that they can have. Yeah. So I think it's cool to have more stuff to think about. I actually had a deck the other day talking about free spells. I played red-black, like super aggressive, and I had Fire Blast, Pyrokinesis, Snuff Out, Mind Collapse, and maybe one more, but at least those 4. And it was like I got into so many weird scenarios where these free spells just bailed me out, and then it's just a matter of taste whether you like it. Like I like having as many cards as possible to think about, and as many options as possible. So for me, it's awesome. But I know a lot of people don't like it. And especially like fans of Modern, once these pitch cards got introduced and Force of Negation and stuff like that, and they're like, oh, I just wish I was living in a simpler time where opponent was tapped out and they couldn't do anything. But I like adding more layers to the game personally. So yeah, I like them in Cube a lot. And it just makes it harder to play against a certain deck as well because, they might have Snuff Out or, Solitude, this and that. Like, I think it's cool.
I might be about to provoke some internet rage here, but I think fans of Modern always think Modern was better 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's possibly very true. At some point, yeah, I guess people just want like Splinter Twin and Affinity and stuff like that to be good, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I liked this exact one Modern format, and it needed to be that forever.
Yeah, nostalgia is real sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
I had this down as a question for later, but kind of as we've mentioned Splinter Twin, it kind of feels like a good time to kind of like pivot to it. We talked about some cards that kind of have been good and have been impressive. Kind of, do you think we're at a point where kind of like combos like Kiki-G Splinter Twin are kind of starting to show their age a little bit now? And do you think it's time to kind of like, for some of these older, more traditional archetypes, kind of like we've already seen it with kind of mono green kind of being slowly shifted out of cubes. Like, do you think there's like Kiki-G Splinter Twin is kind of on the chopping block for cubes nowadays?
Yeah, so funnily enough, it has not been in the LSV's cube for a good while, and Magic Online Cube has actually cut it as well, at least 2 iterations ago, and I'm pretty sad about that. I still think it can hold its weight, but I'm definitely getting there on the Splinter Twin meter. It's getting lower and lower, I would say.
Yeah, it's not been a good few years for it, has it? But I think I agree with you. I still think if you have like a good blue-red interactive deck, it is improved by Splinter Twin and Deceiver Exarch most of the time, right?
Yeah, the casting cost on Kiki-Jiki is the big one. If that was like 2 red and 3 colorless, it would be way better.
Don't give them ideas, Andreas.
that would work.
They'll do that.
That's a lot because these decks oftentimes want to cast like Counterspell or Mana Drain or Cryptic Command or Narset, and then your mana is it has high demands for your mana. Actually, now that I think about it, the cube that I played for the Mox Ruby at Eternal Weekend, we played with an awesome cube from the Oklahomigan Magic community. And they actually had Splinter Twin in the cube, and I played blue-red, and I had all twin pieces. I had a good deck. I had a fun time playing that. But it's also the nostalgia, right? 10 years ago, I used to travel to GPs and play that card, and so yeah, nostalgia is big. I think it's the most mature decision that it's kind of ridden towards the sunset.
For sure. If they put Consecrated Sphinx back in the cube, I'm sure I'll end up playing it and it'll be completely horrible because that card sucks.
That's another one. Yeah, I had a tough time dealing with the removal of that as well. But
yeah, I used to be quite happy like first picking that card. Yeah. It was great, you know.
Like yesterday, I did the same.
Yeah.
Are there any other kind of cards or archetypes that kind of you think are starting to show their age?
I think it's mainly some of the archetypes changing their form. And if you stick to the old principles, you're not going to do very well. And I actually think the green one was a great example that James gave, where, okay, I'm looking to play a ton of mana elves. So I'm basically only going to have like cheap acceleration and then top bombs and then big hole in the middle. But now if you are drafting that archetype like the modern way, so to speak, you're going to have like maybe 1/7 drop and everything else is going to be like good 3, 4s, and 5s. So you don't just fall flat when your mana elf gets killed, et cetera, et cetera. So it's more like adapting with the times, I would say. The same with like classic blue-white control with like 1.5 win conditions. Like that's bad as well. It's like you still want to impact the board. You don't just want to sit behind and be one-dimensional with like counterspells and Wrath of Gods and stuff like that. Like you actually want cards that win the game. I remember back in the day when I watched LSV Cube, it was always like, yeah, I don't really have a win con, but we'll win somehow. Like that was just the sentiment, right? But these days it's actually good to get on the board because you never know when it's correct to shift gears. So that's also why a lot of the good constructed decks these days they have different gears. Like when am I the control deck? When am I the aggressor? Like, and you can kind of shift between that. And I think the good cube decks have that as well. So it's more like updating and not being stuck in like the old ways of thinking about the archetypes.
Yeah, it definitely feels like you just have to be generally more proactive nowadays than you used to.
That's it's better like to ask questions than to come up with the right answer every time, right? That's just how Magic is. When they print powerful cards, they also printed powerful answers, and that's like good as well to kind of keep up. But yeah, the best example is stuff like Oko and Uro. Those cards are, when you slot those into your control deck, you both have a way to not lose, but they are also a way to win, which is huge compared to earlier cards you would play in those slots.
I think the other thing with the green deck as well, right, is that it used to feel really bad to not be mono green when you were playing a bunch of mana elves.
Yep.
And the mana's just so much better in Cube now with obviously triomes, but just better duels, and the land cyclers are great additions, I think, as well.
Yeah,
right?
great point about the triomes. That's definitely also something that makes cards like Minsc and Boo and Fourth Lingus great, because when you draft Minsc and Boo, you're not necessarily looking to be red-green. And when you draft Fourth Lingus, you're not necessarily looking to be Boros. You can be like whatever and then splash one of the two colors pretty easily, I would say.
I think I had a draft last week where I was and ended up like fair Demir, like Dark Confidant stuff, splash Fourth Lingus, because you can, you just take some fetches and some triomes early, you can get that.
I've had the same a few times, the double splash for those two cards specifically.
Yeah.
It works sometimes. Sometimes you don't get to play it, but sometimes you can actually make it work because of like a triome and a fetch and a good combination for you. And then, you can play this duel, kind of free roll one of the duels, and then all of a sudden you can maybe cast Fourth Lingus and it's worth it.
Yeah. I think we have a really nice thing with the triomes as well. They make the fetch lands so much easier to just take early without being at all attached to the colors, because like each triome is fetched by all but one fetch land, right? So it's you just, whatever colors you end up, if you take your wooded foothills early, you'll probably have some useful lands to fetch with it, right?
Definitely. That's also something that some people are kind of slow to adapt to, the fact that triomes make fetches better, and triomes don't necessarily, you don't have to play all of the three colors for that to be worth it. So yeah, it's just like people are sometimes kind of slow with picking up on new like ways to play, and it definitely shows when I play on Magic Online, at least. Then yeah, there's just some creativity that takes some time to develop, I guess.
When I started cubing, I was reading the articles online. I think the general consensus at the time, like this is like 5-6 years ago, was the kind of order of lands was original, duel, fetch, shock. What would you say it is now? Kind of like is fetch like the first pick, or like is triome higher than a duel? Kind of like where are you roughly in terms of like say there's nothing super exciting in a pack. How early are you taking like a land kind of?
I would say fetches are on top of the power ranking, but they're on top because of the existence of triomes and duels and shocks, right? So I like fetches. I like fetches the most. Having untapped lands is generally like ideal, but the fact that they can couple with triomes, just makes them better. But yeah, I think I actually remember that like Underground Sea, Volcanic Island, you would take that over, I don't know, Misty Rainforest or whatever. That's how I remember it as well.
It's super It's super dependent on just your first couple of picks, though, right? Even like if you're say you're drafting like Doomsday, you want like Underground Sea over everything else, right? Because it's so important to get that to be able to make that triple black early, and it's like, well, find some way to fetch this, whether it be like fetch land patrol or something.
Yeah, there's always like exceptions to the rule, but I would say in general, the fetches are better. And then if you go into like specific archetypes, like let's say you play Boros kind of low to the ground with both white 1-drops and red 1-drops, then all of a sudden Plateau is in higher demand than whatever, Wooded Foothills. So, and the example that James gave, like Doomsday, like you get like early Doomsday, you're looking to make that mana work and also cast some blue spells in that deck. You need that Underground Sea. Like that's going to be an important one.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was a great example, like the Boros with both red and white 1-drops. I remember like sort of the given wisdom, definitely when I started playing Cube, was be mono red or mono white. Never be Boros aggro.
Yeah.
What do you think's really shifted that? Is that just like the better fixing, or is it the like there are more power level outliers? So it's like, well, I got this Inti or this Lelia, I really want to put it in my white deck.
Yeah, so great points. Like the overall power level. So when you can only play one color, your force is that you're not going to have any mana issues. So when you can play for more colors, you're going to have higher card quality. But then the mana becomes the issue. So if you can get the mana to work and you have like great cards from two colors, that's just better. So I think it has to do with a combination of what you said. You want great cards from two different colors, but if you can't cast them, then it's actually not that good, right? So when I play those decks, it's like let me give an example. I have a Swords to Plowshares I really want to play, and I have a Lelia. That's two cards I really want to play. And then I see myself drafting another red card and another white card. So I'm not going to be mono red splash Plow or mono white splash Lelia. I kind of realize, okay, I might have to play both. Also, if like somebody else is taking the red removal for their Izzet control deck, you can kind of read the draft, and then it's like, okay, that's why I need the white, because then I have some interaction in that color. And then all of a sudden you really need to draft fixing, like even stuff like Inspiring Vantage, or I'll even highly pick like Triomes, even though I don't want them in my aggro deck in a perfect world. But you need to kind of quickly figure out if you want to cast spells of two different colors, you need like good mana, because playing 8 plains and 9 mountains, that's most likely not going to lead to good things in the long run, at least.
Yeah, for sure. You've got to make sacrifices. It also means you generally don't get to run the good colorless aggro lands, right? You don't get to Mutavault or Wasteland people.
Yeah, that's a cool thing about being, if you play mono white or mono red and it's just open, then sometimes you can take like always call it a luxury pick, where it's like, oh, I'll take this Wasteland because I'm going to wheel this terrible card for the 7 other guys, right? I'm going to wheel that anyway, so I can take the Wasteland here. So picking your spots there is also like super super important, because if the color is contested, you might have to take the colored card, and then you can't have the Wasteland. So identifying when you can actually wheel stuff is a big thing as well when you're drafting monocolored.
Oh, for sure. I think that's a really big thing that I think it's actually like a lot more important, I think, in Cube versus regular booster draft, right? Because the cards are more archetype specific. You can have like by pack 3, you can be almost like 100% certain that certain cards you want are going to wheel, right? And you can just take the card that's way less important for your deck, but other people might take from you.
Yeah, sometimes I have those picks where it's like, I want this other card more, but I'm a greedy guy, so I think I can get both, right?
Why would I just have that card when I could have both of these cards?
Yeah, definitely.
The other interesting thing I've seen discussed a bit recently is so I think definitely of the busted new cards, it's shifted the power level away from blue a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, good topic. Definitely. I agree.
Yeah. Do you think like blue is still the best color in Powered Cube?
It's actually so. These questions are making me, because you're asking exactly the right question, and now I start to be like introspective, and I'm like, am I just drafting blue because of nostalgia? But I actually think there's something to it, like exactly the same like the Splinter Twin conversation, because the emotions in me want to say, no, Splinter Twin is an evergreen. Let's put it back in the cube. And I also want to say the same to that question here, but I would say it's balanced. I would say it's more balanced. Historically, it was like blue was just so much better, in my opinion. But the thing is, when something is vastly better than something else, then that creates a new opportunity for people to draft other decks and get like uncontested, get better decks. And that can kind of even out the playing field. But I think just now it's actually just an even playing field. Blue is great, but so are all the other colors, in my opinion. Maybe actually green is my least favorite color, but it's still super competitive and people win with it all the time. So I actually really like the balance between the colors. Like I never expect, like it's not like I have this ideal that the colors need to be balanced, but it's like I guess it's the best if they are.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think it's in a really good spot. I think that I agree. I think it's probably like pretty much even at the moment. I do kind of get the vibe if I do like leagues on Magic Online. I think blue can be pretty overdrafted a lot of the time. Like where something like white just feels like it's completely open, like 50% of the drafts.
Yeah, I have similar, like I draft a lot, so it's gonna, but it's not like I have hard data. I don't have the stuff that Daybreak has access to, but I would definitely agree. And also something that a guy like LSV, he's been drafting like Storm decks, etc., for like a decade. That's still like something people that aren't the most competitive, just looking to have a good time. They're not locking on to first pick like Mother of Runes. They're locking on Magic Online to try and go busted with like Draw Sevens and Tendrils of Agony and Yawgmoth's Will, like the old days, right? So, and I think blue has kind of the same. I don't know what to compare it to. It's like in Legacy, the way people talk about like Ancient Tomb decks. It's not. It's like the Ancient Tomb. When the Ancient Tomb deck wins around, it's like, yeah, that's worth like 2 points. But if a blue deck wins around, that's 3 points right there. Like it's not worth the same in the way people talk about it. And that's kind of similar in Cube. It's like I have a friend I sometimes play with, and then he's like, "Oh, are you cubing? Yeah, I'm cubing. What are you playing?" And then I answer like, "Oh, I have a good mono red deck," and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll ask again tomorrow." Like, and if I say I'm drafting, I have a sweet Underworld Breach deck, he's right there. Like, that's just a matter of taste and what people have seen on content for years. And I feel like LSV has been, I always say he's been playing with his food because he's been winning with most things. And the most entertaining thing to watch is him winning with some Storm cards. So that's what he did for a lot of years.
Yeah, that dude's actually just low-key very influential on what people draft in events, I think.
Very. I even saw on his channel, people were complaining that he was drafting like fair mid-range strategies. It's so funny. Like, oh, you're drafting Lurrus again. Big yawn. Like, it was just so funny.
Oh, no, Lurrus decks are so sweet.
Yeah, but if he's just like trying to play like removal spells and efficient creatures and stuff like that, people want to see some storming and some reanimation and stuff.
That's true. It's true. I think companions have been a really cool addition, actually, to Cube. We've in Paper Cube, we've been playing unnerfed companions, which has been quite fun.
Ooh, I played that in Constructed for a while. That was
it was not so fun then, but yeah, there's it definitely got some pretty high power turn ones. But
which do you have? You have Lurrus, which is obviously pretty awesome. Then you have the Fox, and what about?
And we have the Is It one, and Lutri.
Yeah, you've got Lutri. I don't have Lutri in mind at the moment. I might add it in.
We've had Yorion for a while, but that one came out.
I've got Yorion in. I think Yorion's quite bad, but it's.
What about the big hippo? There's like Kiruga or something.
That one seems a bit tough to me.
Oh yeah, then it's like you can't play.
Can't play your Moxen.
Oh right. Yeah. That's like a constructed card where you can like cheat a bit on the the mana values. Got it.
But no, I think last cube we did went like turn 1 land Lurrus, crack my Lionseye Diamond, echo, replay my Diamond, echo of Eons.
Oh,
it's just like
that's the dream. Yeah. Oof, Lionside Diamond and Lurus
Mhm.
should be illegal, and it is, I guess.
Most
Yeah, we had
places,
to after it
yeah.
to bring it back.
Nice. Just touching on kind of like the balances of colors and kind of how you think they're all kind of in a good place. Like, I would disagree a little bit with that. I do think black does struggle to kind of have a primary identity. Kind of like, no one's really ever a black deck. You're kind of like, black's traditionally always been kind of like the support color. Kind of, do you think that that's still the case? Like, even with cards kind of like Shieldred being printed, like with Orcish Bowmasters.
Yeah, I would agree that. So, funnily enough, the video that I'm uploading today is me I play mono black in a Vintage Cube, and I'm getting destroyed. So, point taken. But I think black. It's kind of true that black doesn't, like, aside from reanimation, it has kind of struggled. But I actually think it's a great support color with fair cards like discard spells and removal spells. The removal spells have gotten a lot better. Like,
that's true. Yeah.
Bitter Triumph, I really like. Infernal Grasp, stuff like that. Let's see, what else do we have? I think Cut Down is reasonable. I think I'm forgetting one here, but it's like super solid. And then there's actually some cool mid-range cards like the new Vampire, the 2/4, the Preacher, if you know that card.
Preacher of the Schism, yeah.
That card is like super solid. When I attacked with it the first time, we were both at 20. I got both triggers. I didn't realize that. That's kind of cool.
Oh, that's pretty good. Okay, yeah.
That card is good. I actually like the card Gix more than most people. The double black 1/3/3.
I really like Gix. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I kind of agree. It's only like half of your deck, if that makes sense. So you have the reanimation, and you have some great reactive cards to go like into more Jund style deck, I would say. And sometimes you have some awesome like reanimation or instant reanimation with like Shallow Grave, Goryo's Vengeance, Corpse Dance, stuff like that. But yeah, I guess I subscribe to that idea that it's a support color the most, definitely.
I'm looking at kind of turning the conversation kind of to the future, as it were, of Cube. Kind of like, what do you think like black needs to get more of an identity, or kind of like, or for someone to say, I have this sweet mono black deck? Kind of like, what pieces is it missing? Is it more aggressive creatures?
I'm not too big on aggressive creatures. I think we have enough of those in red and white necessarily. But just having like solid mid-range cards, I think you can go a long way, and that is mainly going to be like creatures for 2 mana that's worth playing with. I don't think cards like the Shade or the Shadow, or like Misery Shadow, like it's
very fair.
It's not really a Tarmogoyf, but something along those lines. Like if you have more stuff, and the thing is, stuff like Orcish Bowmasters and Shieldred, they don't really count because everybody's going to want them. You kind of want something that cool once you're like heavy black, right? So I wouldn't mind like some devotion theme and just having it on some like good creatures. I like the Voidwalker. I think that's good. So reasons to play like Voidwalker, Hymn to Torag, Liliana. We have a bunch of solid cards, but we need just a little bit more like critical mass, I would say. But I'm not sure if like you need to cut black cards if you need to keep a color balance, and then maybe you will hinder its ability to enable reanimation. And I'm not sure it's a net win if you start going down that road.
Yeah, that's fair. Although I think looking at the cube list, the Misery Shadow and the Tenacious Underdog, I could live with seeing them guys go.
Yeah, I mean those cards I'll play if I have like red black, like the deck I played the other day. I had like red black, and the actual creatures didn't matter too much. My deck was mainly about discarding the opponent's hand, clearing the way, and attacking for lethal, right? But black didn't really play a vital part in that. It was mainly the red cards. But yeah, you're right. Those are like mainly fillers.
As I think it's obviously not going down, despite being triple black, it's not really a card for mono black, but I think the addition of Doomsday was really nice to like give you a bit more of a reason to do that Black Storm thing. Because I think like the old like Dark Ritual into my Yawgmoth's Will type Storm decks, where I mean you can still draft them, but they're maybe a little less good than they used to be.
Yeah, I mean I love Doomsday. I have played that card and constructed in 20 years. Like I think it's awesome, and especially in a format like Cube where it's just so awesome. Like the situations it presents, and you need to get creative. I remember I had like a Thought Scour that was like my way to minimize my library. I had like pretty bad support for the Doomsday, but the Thought Scour could kind of cheat on my deck size. And then I think they also did a good job. They have the Sunken Ruins in the
cube. That was really smart.
They don't have like the other filter lands. They have this card for Doomsday specifically because the Doomsday deck needs to cast Doomsday, and then Jace Dealer of Mysteries or Thassa's Oracle. So you need like heavy blue-black filtering, right? And they kept the Urborg as well. And I think that's more or less it's only warrant that's the only thing that warrants it in the cube. So and I think they did a good job. They have the Doomsday and then 2 things that wins with Doomsday. I think that's a pretty good balance, I would say.
Yeah. In a 540, that's kind of a decent amount. Like you're likely to see one of them, I guess. Or it's Thassa's Oracle, and then is it the Jace Wielder of Mysteries? Is that the form?
Mysteries, yeah.
Yeah. And it's not like impossible to, even if you miss on both of those, you can maybe build a pile with like where you win with a freeze or a tendrils or something.
Yeah, definitely. Then it gets a bit more spicy, but that's definitely possible. I've also seen someone go like whatever time walk regrowth or whatever, like which is a pretty cool way to time walks again and again on suspend basically, and that'll sometimes win the game. Like I've seen people get a bit creative with that card. It's cool.
Yeah, for sure. You'll notice I said you can. I will 100% screw that up personally, but hypothetically, I know other people can do that.
Yeah, I remember back in the day, it's like we had these huge spreadsheets on how to win with tendrils. This is way before Lab Maniac and before Thassa's Oracle, and then you would use like Time Twister, and then you would make sure you had exactly Time Twister and 7 more cards, so you would draw all of them, so with no fail rate. So it was like it was so hard to navigate. And then hopefully you could like storm them out. But yeah, Lab Maniac and Thassa's Oracle, that's a different beast.
Nice. I think I've played Doomsday in my entire life once, and it was in a commander deck, and it wasn't good. I know my limits, okay?
Yeah, Doomsday is not for everyone.
Yeah, there's also a few players in our cube group who I think would kill me if I'm the one cutting them on the Doomsday piles. But
yeah.
In a couple of months, we have Modern Horizons 3 coming out. The last couple of Modern Horizons have very much kind of like been responsible for kind of kicking Cube up a few power levels, as we discussed. Kind of, they've already spoiled Colorless Eldrazi, Madness, Energy Spells, and more free spells. And these are all things that we are known to be very fair and to never have caused issues. Kind of, given how the last 2 have gone, kind of like, is there anything, Andreas, kind of like specifically you're hoping for, or is there, I guess, as well, kind of anything you're hoping not to see?
I'm not too scared about the future. So I'm not going to say there's anything I'm not hoping for. I think they actually did like a great job with the other sets. Like just imagine the narrative might as well have been, then they just kicked up a huge fuzz about these expansions and there were only like 2 relevant cards. What a failure. Like I think they actually did a great job, and I think people are just in general scared of change because they love this game above everything. So God forbid it's going to change to something that you don't like as much as you did yesterday. So I think it's more about people being willing to like grow with the game. Wizards have, developed Magic for plus 30 years. They wouldn't have got here if they were being managed by all of these guys being scared about changes. So I'm welcoming all of that new stuff. So I'm more looking at the new options and what I have to like account for. I'm more looking for that. Actually, I'm not a big like spoilers guy or I'm crossing my fingers this and that. Like I usually just see what I have in front of me and then take it from there. So I can't. I hope there's a bunch of cool cube editions for sure, and maybe some old cards that I feel like would benefit modern. That's also cool. I'm a huge nostalgia guy, like Counterspell, Fire Ice. I was so happy when they introduced those cards. It was about time, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm hoping for some old bangers.
Sure. I think the nice thing about cube is it's pretty much impossible for new printings to have a really bad effect because they're not going to be more powerful than Black Lotus and Solving, right? And if they're really unpleasant to play with, people just not put them in cubes. It's a very forgiving format for new printings, right?
The only thing you can say is they might push out some of your like favorite cards in cube, and that can be a tough one to swallow. I've had that. Like even when you just mentioned Consecrated Sphinx, it's like, oh yeah, that was good times, right?
The one that made me really sad was Opposition. I loved Opposition decks.
Yeah, and Opposition.
Yeah. I put it in my cube. I'm not letting go. I'm just I'm hanging on for a few more drafts until I go through with an Opposition deck.
Opposition. That was also a good one.
I think that's a very healthy way of looking at it, kind of just in terms of let them print what they want. Like I definitely heard, I can't remember who it was, but someone said, I'm kind of fine with them burning down every other format if I get some cool cards for cube. And personally kind of agree with that. I'm like, cube is the main format I play. So
yeah, the thing to remember is the burning down of the formats is going to be very temporary, because if a deck is winning too much, they just like nuke the card, and that's obviously not a good look. Like I saw some video the other day, and it was like there are some cards that were just legal for like 2 or 3 weeks. Then you would obviously say, okay, maybe they could have put more work into seeing that in the crystal ball, right? But I mean, they do their best job, and we love this game, and I live and breathe this game. So I'm not gonna make any trouble because they made put too many loyalty on Oko or whatever I can criticize them for.
No, that makes sense. Just as long as they give me a Dredge 7, I think I'll be happy.
Dredge 7. I wouldn't wait up for that one.
Yeah, that seems fair.
So I just want to ask a bit about the cube that you guys are building. Like, how do you change it when new cards come out? Are you like very conservative, or like how much is the nostalgia versus the new shiny stuff? Like, how are you balancing that when you're like switching cards and stuff?
So we both have our own individual cubes. So kind of James, yours is relatively new. It's kind of like we did an episode on it recently. Kind of like it's like a few months old. I've had mine together I built it at the perfect time of like January 2020. So that was exact time to build something to do with friends. One of the reasons I'm taking the initiative out and kind of powering it down is so I can get back to a point where I am testing more. There was definitely a point with mine where kind of when it was a higher powered level, I just wasn't able to test as much. So kind of like everything that's in a vintage cube is in mine apart from fast mana currently.
Right.
I really like kind of like testing new things and like trying out new archetypes. Kind of like the next change to my cube is about 90, for example. Like I kind of do that kind of every 3 months or so.
Okay.
We're quite fortunate, kind of like we have a very like active play group. We kind of at least like I think the average cube is kind of every 2 to 3 weeks. So we're quite fortunate kind of to get in person ones done pretty regularly. Kind of James, kind of like how have you found updating yours? Have you found it?
Yeah, I think I've just been like, if a new card comes out and I think it has a reasonable shot of being good, and it's not like I don't have to make super painful cuts for it, I'll give it a try. For like, if it's bad after 2 cubes and no one's playing it, I'll come straight back out. I think it's you can be.
What about the Warhammer cards? Did you guys add any of those?
Oh, but a bunch of them. Kind of like one of the best archetypes in my cube is based around some of the Warhammer cards.
Oh, perfect.
So like
the Chaos Defiler is messed up, actually. That's very strong.
It's a red-black workshop style deck. So it uses Chaos Defiler and then things like Scorpeth Lord. It's like 2 and a black for a 3/2 gives menace and gives all your other artifact creatures +1/+0 and menace and has unearth. So kind of that with just more generic kind of like artifact aggro stuff, things like Phyrexian Dragon Engine.
That's cool. It's not your typical artifact synergies coming out of red black. That's cool.
Yeah, really enjoyed those. And then kind of like I think that this either sees Legacy or Vintage Play, but kind of like Triumph of St. Catherine's just been a really, really good card.
Yeah, I would say it's a Legacy stable. It's super solid.
Yeah, no, that black deck's been really cool because it's like also Goblin Welder actually works well in the deck, and I kind of think that card's just a trap in like regular Vintage Cube.
Yeah, it's very rarely good for me. It's the same with the 4-minute The Ready Planeswalker. They're good together with a very like select number of cards, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm not like because I know the Warhammer 40k cards have just been printed onto Mitgo kind of in the last month or so, but kind of
it's like 1 week old or 1.5 or something. Yeah,
but I haven't seen them going into the cube yet. Kind of like I think I heard that there was like because of the revenue share, they have to do the whole deck as once. So I think it means even if they're on Mitgo, they can't put them into cube because they're making money from them in a way that isn't split with.
There's definitely something about like the rights about the artwork and stuff like that. So I think they're in some kind of pre-cons or something along those lines right now. So people kind of have to buy them in the shop to get access to it.
You have to buy the whole deck to get one card you want on Mitgo right now.
Yeah, I know they can't like put them in treasure chests and stuff. I don't know if they can put them in cubes. I think maybe the cube season started before they came out anyway. So
and also they announced that they are going to do the changes for like 3 months at the time or something. They're going to make like a spring update or something along those lines. So it's going to work in a different way now. But I'm sure they're going to test. They're going to test it out a handful or two of those cards.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think the Defiler is the one that I'd be like prioritizing.
Yeah, that's a great one.
I've seen people have been trying Poxwalkers in Vintage. That one looks cool.
I actually played against that when I traveled to the US in December. I played Eternal Weekend. I played that in the main event against a guy with that card. I hadn't seen it before.
Nice. Yeah, no one's prepped for it because it's not on mid-game.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I play 99% of my Magic. So I was like, oh, I have to read that one. It looks cool. I only knew about the white St. Catherine, the Miracle card, because that was just pretty obviously like a good fit for control deck. So I knew about that one. But yeah, I didn't know about, and Chaos Defiler, I just heard, like, I have some friends who like Painter and stuff, so they were like, oh, I can't play this card online. So, but other than that, I didn't know about any of the cards.
No, so there's a Gruul card called Morlock that's quite good.
Oh yeah, I saw that as well in some, I don't know, maybe some Twitter post or something about like with like real life deck lists, like back in autumn or something. And I saw that as well. That seems like a cool card.
It's just very good in like the Minsk and Boo-esque Brum player manager or play something that kills you type deck. So
yeah, that card seems fine. I like those cards that kind of scale well into the game. Like Pest Infestation is another good example. It's like, it's good when you have 3 mana, it's good when you have 9 mana. I really like those type of cards, like flexible, and they scale good early, good late. I think it's just good design.
No, definitely. And I guess one of the things with these Warhammer cards is as you mentioned, because they're not on Nitgo, they're not on the most popular cube, a lot of people, like I guess the majority of people who play cube won't have really had a chance to kind of even see or play with them. So
I like when it's like synchronized Magic Online and in paper play. I think that's the best experience for everyone. So your practice at the local game store makes sense when you're playing online and vice versa.
Oh yeah, for sure. They seem to be getting away from it. Like even in like booster draft now, you get like, you know, the list in paper is different from the cards you get on Arena.
Okay.
I think they need to try and keep that in line a little bit more.
That's interesting. I would imagine it was in most players' interest to like make the experience as close to the real deal as possible.
I'm guessing part of it is just printing certain cards on Arena that they kind of can't be. I'm not going to say can't be bothered, but it's more just kind of like I guess because anything they print on Arena becomes legal in one of the. Like, it's not historic, is it? Or timeless or something like that. Like any card they print will become legal, so maybe it's...
Okay, yeah, there could be something there that I've never downloaded Arena, so I don't know about that.
Yeah, well, I don't really play too much Arena or Mitgo. Kind of, this is going to sound really soppy, but I actually like the gathering part of Magic as well. It's very important. Very important thing to actually
nobody's going to blame you for that. That's cool. Yeah. That's definitely cool, and nobody's gonna take that away from you. It's nice you can enjoy the game in different ways. I would say that's one of the big strengths about Magic. Like you can play it on so many levels. You can have fun at the kitchen table, or you can try and be a world champion. Like that's beautiful in my opinion.
On the topic of ways that you can play Magic, kind of the second part that we're going to touch on today is kind of competitive cube and kind of how that affects the way that you play it. Because as you kind of mentioned, you two both, from the sounds of it, have cast a Doomsday compared to me, a bit more casual, bit of put off by that. But kind of, yeah. So for a bit of background, kind of, so Andreas and James as well, you both kind of are part of a group that takes Cube a little bit more seriously, kind of like effectively it's competitive cube. So I would like to talk about that for a bit, as it's something not a large amount of people out there, kind of like the general public, will really know too much about. So kind of, Andreas, can you kind of talk to us a little bit of kind of like the competitive scene that you play in?
Yeah, so I'm playing weekly on a Discord server originally created by a guy called Alpha Frog. He's doing some shows for Wizards of the Coast, weekly right now. I believe it's on Tuesdays, and another old school player called Tim. They kind of made this draft server, and then we're drafting on a platform called draftmancer.com. And then most likely we're going to be playing teams. The team aspect is huge. Then you're like either 3-on-3 or 4-on-4. And it's mostly going to be, let's say, proven players in there. So you kind of need to have a name within the scene, or you need to have a friend that has a name within the scene. Like, this is a pretty close circle. We are basically only playing with friends. And that's a big aspect of the game as well. So the team aspect is basically we have this team chat. We talk about our decks. We scout. We take screenshots of the opponent's decks. We try and do whatever we can in our power to win the match, right? So just by the definition of being competitive, for me, that is basically, it means something for me to win. Because if I'm just playing for fun, I might go for like a draft strategy or a play that's like, oh, this is cool if it works out, like for the story or for the whatever reason, right? When you say competitive, it's like all of that goes out the window, and the sole reason is to maximize my chance to win. That's like my definition of competitive, and that's what I get from playing on this server, because that's everybody's mindset. While we're also having fun and becoming better players, because if you surround yourself with good players, chances are you're gonna get better yourself. That's just the nature of the beast, right? So that's basically what kind of scratches my competitive itch. Which is like, I like playing on Magic Online as well, like the leagues, like, because I love playing. But this is like the competitive stuff where winning is number one priority.
But that makes sense. Yeah, kind of. I can definitely see how kind of like going into a cube specifically with the mindset of I am here to win would change it, because like a lot of the cubes that I play in are in cubes that I have either built or a friend has built. And kind of like one of the things I often do is kind of like, oh, I put this archetype in, I want to test out this archetype to kind of see how it'll go. Kind of like, I'm assuming there's less of that in a competitive scene. It's kind of like, are you kind of sticking to more things that you know work, or kind of like, are you still kind of trying new things when you're testing?
I would say once you get to a certain level and you're very familiar with the archetypes, you can start to even push the boundaries and get creative. But it's always within like, what's reasonable. It's kind of tough to explain, but when you feel pretty safe about what works, you can maybe like push the boundaries a little bit. And but I would say it's like within reason 99% of the time, and that's like the general way to play. That being said, it's actually, when we draft, you can kind of see the names you're drafting against, and you're going to know each person's preferences. You can even go and research what they did the last 10 drafts. There's some guys on the server, they'll go and research and be like, oh, what about this pick? And they will talk about that pick and kind of hold people accountable. So that angle is like, makes you really sharp, I would say. Like, it can be a lot of pressure, maybe stressful for some, but for me, it's like even more motivation to stay sharp, because anybody can just go, oh, what did this guy do the last 10 drafts? Like, it's, you're playing like with open, like, yeah, it's open information.
Yeah.
You can research. So it's like poker in a way, where you kind of research your opponent's tendencies.
Well, that tells and stuff. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and that's true here as well. Like, we have players who are very favored towards aggro, and that's going to play a role if you're next to that player. So yeah, it's there's a lot more layers to it, I would say, aside from having fun.
That makes sense. No. It is interesting to hear that kind of like, even at competitive levels, kind of like people's tendencies will still be a part of it. Kind of like, it's not kind of, you're not just reading what is open and
Exactly.
kind of and always adapting. Kind of like, people like, are people still forcing stuff at this level, would you say, or kind of like, is it more leaning towards?
I wouldn't
something?
say forcing, but I would say some people have preference. Meaning, if there's a close pick, they're going to go for the card that goes into their favorite archetype.
Yeah.
And so having a wide range is pretty important. Like, a range is basically that you're comfortable playing. Let's say there are 20 different archetypes. You're comfortable playing as many of those as possible, because every once in a while you're going to be in a seat that was supposed to draft, what do I know, red, black, reanimator. But if you don't have that in your range, and you don't really know how to piece that together, and when do I have enough enablers, when do I have enough payoff, stuff like that, then you can kind of get in trouble. I actually have a hole in my range. I'm very bad at drafting like fast bond exploration decks, like Suranor, Crucible, Course of Krufix, Draw 7, stuff like that. I'm not. So whenever that's like when I'm supposed to draft my lane, I'm always like, oh please, give me some other decks. But I try and improve.
Yeah, I was curious to ask you about this, actually, because obviously you've played Age of Observer a lot more than I have. Because I definitely have a hole in my range for like the like ritual storm decks, like anything where I need to like be like, I cast these 6 spells and then I cast my Underworld Breach for my Yarg Will. I do it, and then I'm like, oh, I have one less card in my graveyard than I thought, so I lose. I think fairly recently I had a draft observer where it was like, first picked Wheel of Fortune of a weak pack, second pick's like, oh, definitely meant to take this line-side diamonds.
Yeah.
I don't really know how I get out of this.
That's the exact same feeling like I have. And sometimes you're going to get in those situations. And I think you should just take it as a learning experience. You can get help if you're playing in a team environment. You can kind of get help building the deck, stuff like that. Like, just take it as a learning experiment. Nobody is a master of all archetypes. So at the end of the day, and nobody's blaming each other either, because once you have the team aspect, like, that's like a professional football team. Nobody's going to say, oh, you played a terrible match, you're the reason we lost. Like, we win together and we lose together. So I think you should just take it as a learning experience. And I don't think it's a bad thing to like mess up or not do your best, or it's fine.
How do you find being in a team kind of like affects your draft? Kind of like specifically kind of like, how highly are you hate picking cards if you know kind of like if you know the person to your left always picks Storm, how like aggressively are you kind of trying to cut people, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so that's a very important dynamic. So when you play in a pod, which means you just play like by yourself against the opponents, you kind of want to cooperate with your close like player to the right, player to the left. But in team draft, it's like if you can make it so that your deck becomes a little worse, but your next door neighbor's deck become a lot worse, you'll take that because that's a net gain for the team, right? So sometimes I know a term that some of the other guys have started using is like hooking your like neighbor. It's like, oh, I passed this, I don't know, Archon of Cruelty, but now you're never going to see another like good black card because I took, what do I know? I took a Reanimate, but now you got this Archon that's like your false hope, and now you're never going to see anything. So maybe you're going to take like some kind of bad black cards to, oh yeah, I got an Archon, so then you might hook the player to the right, and then maybe that's going to end up a net gain for your team. But most of the time, you're looking to improve your own deck. There's actually a cool thing I want to mention. While if you open like 2 Moxes, then it's not necessary. It's like if you take a Mox, your opposing team is also going to get a Mox. I think this discussion is pretty awesome. So there's a case to be made. If you can take a other strong card, your team is still going to get a Mox, but you get this strong card to like build around. I think the best example is like Atraxa. Atraxa is like a super strong first pick, obviously worse than a Mox, but your team still gets the Mox, and you get to build around the Atraxa. Where, let's say you take Mox, next guy takes Mox, then your teammates might not need the Atraxa. So then maybe you're helping the other team by just taking the Mox and thinking, oh, I want as many game wins as possible myself. But it's a team game. You need to get to 5 wins or 7 wins if you play 4-4. So I love all of that. Like the more you can add, like the more layers you can add. I love that. Like it feels like a genius, like passing 2 Moxes to like, what is that player supposed to do? Probably take one of them. So our team gets 2 Moxes, and you kind of make a selfless decision. And cool.
I think the other really big difference I've noticed, even aside from like the depth of the team strategy, is just the decks are a lot more like scrappy, right? There's just because people are obviously hate drafting from you, and I think there's just a big difference if you compare it to playing leagues. That in leagues, like some amount of the players aren't necessarily like they don't know the power level of all the cards necessarily. So you're wheeling a lot more good cards, whereas that doesn't happen in this server because it's like people are hate drafting and everyone knows what's good. So you actually need to prioritize, like, maybe I need this filler card in spots where it's like, in like playing on Magic Online or in a lot of other environments, you're just like, no, I'm never going to play that. I'm going to get something better for sure.
I definitely agree. That's something I noticed when I started sending all my deck lists. I have an old friend from the old city where I used to live. He doesn't really have time for Magic, so he just, enjoys Magic, let's say secondhand from my whatever screenshots or whatever. And then he's like, your decks on the server always seem like they're way worse than on Magic Online. So that's exactly the reason, because the opposition is going to be better on average, and it's a team environment where hate picking is actually viable. It doesn't make any sense to hate pick in a league on Magic Online. That's just, you're not going to play against the person, and you actually want to cooperate to get a better deck for yourself, right?
Yeah.
I feel so unbelievably naive. In my head, I was like, oh, everyone's really good. Everyone will find their lane immediately and just take the cards that work for the deck. But no, it's a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, it gets very complex, because I know that you know that I know that you know, right? So that's but it's yeah, it makes a lot of sense that was like your first thought about it. But my experience is, I can definitely tell the difference between something I've won with on Magic Online versus on the server. Like some of those decks are not pretty.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's also like you can't wheel your importance card that no one else wants, right? You don't get to wheel your Underworld Breach, even if you know no one else wants Underworld Breach.
Yeah, there's also if you notice when LSV drafts, he's always talks about, if I get past this card, now my neighbor kind of knows they already passed this card, so they're not going to pass me that card. That's just I need to open it myself. It's just utopia to believe that I'll also get shipped this card. So where on Magic Online you never know, right? So that's the difference, and I think it just comes down to like how much do you care about winning, and how much do you care about testing stuff out, having fun, experimenting, stuff like that, right? It's like both are good things. They're just different, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Going back, kind of like more overview of the thing, kind of like because you guys draft on draft months, so kind of like, does that mean that you're drafting a wide variety of cubes, or is it kind of like you mentioned Alpha Frog, their cube was up on Mitgo Frog, like, are you always drafting the Alpha Frog cube? Are you drafting the Mitgo Vintage cube? Are you drafting LSV's cube? Kind of like, does it change a lot, or kind of like, is it just like, is there kind of one Uber cube that?
It changes a little bit. I think now the standard is LSV's cube, because he's also the most like he manages it like every week. Then at some point he had a cool thing where if you 3-0'd, you could switch a card in the cube. That was like awesome. That could get a bit out of hand at times, but it was like a cool extra thing, right? So he does a good job of like managing maybe like one every week or every 2 weeks. So I think that's like the go-to now. When it's up on Magic Online, I personally I like to practice that. So I oftentimes suggest, let's play the Magic Online cube, because there are these 64-player tournaments that I like to play a lot. But it's not always the most popular suggestion. So most of the time it's LSV's cube, and it's like 90% the Magic Online cube, I would say.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I don't think LSV's ever posted his cube, but people have posted versions of his cube up online. I'm not sure how up to date they are, but from what I've seen, kind of like there does seem to be like a lot of tests of new cards. Kind of like, is that fair? Kind of like are you playing with the new stuff, or kind of, because it is a lot of older players or a lot of more experienced players? Kind of like, is it kind of like Peluquinos, or is it where are we in terms of cards? Kind of like is always trying to be as up to date and as powerful as possible?
It's just like aiming for the best cards with no like emotions attached. The other day I talked to him and I said he proposed some cuts. We have like a chat for some of the members on the server, and he was like, I'm going to cut these and add these. Do anybody have any arguments for and against? And I was like, yeah, I'm always sad when you like nerf mono red. And he's like, yeah, I'm not looking for people's emotions. I'm looking for like actual. Yeah. So I was like, okay, let me rephrase it. I think it's good to have mono red at a certain power level, but he does a good job, and he gets a lot of feedback, and then the result is like everybody likes to play it. And if there's any card that's like not performing, he'll just remove it. Like that's you can just message him basically. Like James could go and message him now, and if he had a good case for a card, it would be added tomorrow. Like it's not any more important than that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's like close enough to the Magic Online cube, right? That you're I found if I was doing a bunch of drafts of Magic Online in like 64-player drafts or leagues or whatever, I could jump in and play LSV's cube, and I still felt like I knew what I was doing. But it was like maybe a few cards I wouldn't have played with a bunch, but like most of the cards have been in cubes before, so it's like you played with them, you kind of know how. It's not like, oh, this is a completely new thing that I need to learn how to draft.
Yeah, there's a bit less focus on like especially one drops that only go in like one deck, and then he's adding some more like avenues to do something broken, like the Spirit Guides, like Gemstone Caverns. That's just on top of my head some cards that you've never seen on the Magic Online cube, but they're like potentially can do some busted things. He has more initiative creatures, more monarch creatures than the Magic Online cube. So in general, it's a bit less like fast monocolored aggro, and a bit more multicolor good stuff ahead of schedule.
No, sweet. That makes a lot of sense. Kind of, is that high power level cube kind of personally your favorite, or kind of like, do you wish you could play Peasant Cube, that kind of thing? Kind of like
I think so. I play a lot of formats, but I play Vintage Cube to play old broken cards with new broken cards, basically. If I want to play like lower power level, I love playing Pauper. I played Pauper qualifier this weekend, spent 8 hours or something playing
Nice.
9 rounds of Pauper. Like I like that as well. Grinding with comments is also fun. So I just think if you pick your formats accordingly, it's basically nothing different than like what are you gonna watch on Netflix tonight? Like, don't put on a horror movie if you're not in the mood for it. Don't put on a comedy if that's like it has to kind of match your mood. So that's what I do with Magic formats. It's like I'm in a candy store. What do I want to do today?
8 rounds of Pauper is my experience of Pauper is there's not a lot of time between rounds, mostly.
No, there was I think twice I had my clock under 1 minute. It was like super stressful.
Oof, yeah.
So yeah, it was 9 rounds. It was brutal. Like 8 rounds, more or less 8 hours. Sorry, more or less. Yeah, just playing.
Respect for dedication.
Oh yeah, that's definitely something. I'm definitely dedicated. But James, can I ask how has your experience been like joining the server?
Yeah, no, it was super friendly actually. It was like actually not. I was a bit like, is this going to be a bit intimidating? But it was, especially like I joined and then my first draft I went 0-3. I was like, this is horrendous. I'm clearly out of my depth. Everyone's got Pro Tour top 8s. But yeah, no, then I like found my feet a bit. And it's like, just like getting on a call with a couple of people and like chatting through some games. Yeah, it was super friendly actually. And, no, I think
that's good. That's good to hear because I've invited or like helped like a handful of people get on the server. How was the experience? Because the intimidation factor can be something if you don't really know anyone. Like when I joined the server, I've seen all of these guys in real life like multiple times, and like they're my buddies. So I didn't really have that when it came to this server. But that's good. That's good to hear. That's the answer I hoped I was gonna hear.
Yeah, no, it's been good. Once I got some wins, I was fine. I was so the first day I was like, oh, do I want to do this again?
Yeah, it's good just in general with Magic in general, but especially like Vintage Cube. The variance is real. Like I remember like one of the absolute best players on the server played like 4 drafts on 2 days and went 1-11, and that's just gonna happen to everyone, right? So you really have to look at it long term and also just see it as an investment, like with your time into like learning and into developing. Because if you play on this server like regularly, I'm gonna bet that after 6 months or whatever, you can kind of look back and see, whoa, I've really come a long way, like with the way you analyze cards and think about different situations and communicate about Magic. Like it's just a level up thing for me.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like obviously you're like drafting against way better players, but also you're actually drafting where you're 100% just trying to win, which I don't really do with Cube that much otherwise. Like, I'd occasionally outplay a 64 man, but it's like quite a big time commitment. And obviously in leagues, you're just like, oh, this is sweet, let's do this. And like, even if you're winning a lot, it's not like you're not necessarily baking that like what's really the correct pick here, right? You're just doing the you're like, I can win with this, but is it the most winning thing I could do?
Definitely. And the difference between those two, that it's not very important if that's not what you're playing Magic for, right? It's just a different way to play Magic.
Oh yeah, no, but I really like competitive Magic. It's is one of the things that really bugs me at the moment is that like I can't really play limited competitively that much. I do like all the arena opens, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, Cube's a good like outlet for that, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't think we're far from having like a Vintage Cube Pro Tour. I think the time is getting there.
Oh yeah,
like it's still played on like the highest level in the Magic Online Championship Series, and it's just a fan favorite. Like whenever it's up on Magic Online, it's the biggest league by a lot.
Yeah. It made me laugh. I was watching. I think a couple of years ago they had that on. There was one of the guys who'd qualified for it, like not really cubed before they qualified. And they had like 10 cube drafts lifetime, and they joined and drafted Storm for the first time in the mocks, which I thought was a pretty good power move.
Yeah, that's crazy. I actually have a fun story about a friend of mine here from Denmark. He qualified for the mocks like 10 years ago, and then they did some introduction, like interviews with the like 8 participants, and then he just said, "Is there anything you want to add in the end or whatever?" And he was like, yeah, I'm going to force mono red at the tournament, so good luck to my opponents. which is just really a power move, because if somebody says that, are you ever going to draft a red card? That would be just terrible, right? Because then you're going to fight with another guy and you're not going to 3-0. So what he actually ended up doing at the tournament was he first picked a Forked Bolt, which is a terrible first pick for the people not knowing. And he 3-0'd the Mox Vintage Cube portion. That's just like, that was so funny. Just the way how powerful it is if you like face up, say which strategy you're gonna force, right?
Yeah. If only there was a reveal your draft pick function on Magic Online, you know?
Yeah, I remember I played at the Origins PT where you had the double-faced Planeswalkers. So that was actually,
nice.
I opened Nissa, so I had to show that to the whole table. And then that really just changes the dynamic because, you just want to cooperate. And that was just like, it was a good card, and it made my seat just so much better.
Yeah, it was a weird dynamic, that, because I think people thought about it like it's a disadvantage you reveal, and it's a big advantage, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Pick.
Were you around when Rochester draft was a thing?
I don't think I've ever Rochester drafted.
Yeah, you draft face up, basically. And that's just something that, I never played it. I just saw like the old like Phoenix Foundation, Kai Bude, Derek Babarowski, those guys. And they just dominated everyone. Like, it's just with open information, my mind just blows up whenever I think about it, like what that would do to the dynamic of a draft.
Yeah, I think I saw them, like they did it a few years ago on the, was it like, is either the 25-year or...
you're right, you did it in the T-Series finals. Yeah, you're right.
Like a beta draft, or something like that, I think.
Yeah, that's true. They did it around the 2018, around the 25th anniversary. That's actually true. Yeah. Like the Rochester, maybe that was the beta draft, actually.
I think so. Yeah, that was good to watch.
Oof, yeah, that was cool.
Right, so yes, we've chatted about the state of Cube. We've chatted about cubing competitively. Let's kind of put that to practice a little bit. Let's do some pack one, pick ones. I've got a couple up. I'm going to pick one without necessarily an obvious pack one, pick one. So there's no immediate power in this, but
that's cool. And also, even if the pick is, let's say, because look, first of all, Magic is very subjective. Second of all, there can't be a lot of context to the pack that we can kind of, besides what I'm going to pick, there might be a lot of stuff to look for, like what to wheel, what are we setting our neighbors up in, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a bunch of layers to it. So don't worry about the power level necessarily.
No, it makes sense. Cool. Right. So let's go through this pack. So first up, we have a Burgi, God of Storytelling. We have a Yorgamoth, Thran Physician. We have a Tinker, a Brazen Borrower, a Deep Forest Hermit, a Titan of Industry, a Hollowed Fountain, a Remand, a Wild Nakatl, an Inferno Titan, a Fractured Identity, an Elvish Reclaimer, a Soulscar Mage, a Frantic Search, and finally a Blood Crypt.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, that's a cool pack. So basically, I heard you say Tinker. So the thing about Tinker is, I'm going to pick Tinker here, and I'm going to tell you why, and what you need for Tinker to work. Because these days, Tinker requires you to have X amount of cheap artifacts. Usually I'm like minimum 4. And that could be anything from Mox, Mishra's Bauble, Baleful Strix. It could even be something like Thraben Inspector that makes a clue. That doesn't matter. That's not too important. But I think 4 is like the minimum. But then the thing is, the payoff for Tinker is actually, like, that list is pretty short in my opinion. Like, the absolute best one for me is Portal to Phyrexia. That's like the absolute best card, because it's a good comeback card. That's basically what I enjoy about it the most. It's comeback and it's inevitability. And then you have cards like Bolas' Citadel. That's not going to be good at any stage of the game. It's going to be good early. And maybe it's not going to be the most easy card to cast in your deck either. And then it kind of goes down from there. Like, what are we even looking at? We're looking at something like
just like Mere Battlesphere after that.
Mere Battlesphere. I actually like that because it's hard castable in a pinch.
Exactly. If you're in the big mana deck, you can be like, I kind of want Mere Battlesphere in my deck anyway, right?
The other day I played a 64, and then I 3-0'd the first, and at the final table I had a Tinker, and then all I could get my hands on, I first picked Tinker in this one. I was the Cityscape Leveler, is that the name of the 8/8?
I think that card needs to go. It doesn't seem strong to me.
It's really not the best. It's okay, and it was good enough, and it's like maybe slightly worse than Mere Battlesphere, but it's like the bottom of the barrel, I would say, when it comes to payoff. So from that pack, it sounded like cards like Fractured Identity, Remand, Hallowed Fountain, Blood Crypt, those cards we're not going to see again. So yeah, so this pack, what I would usually do is I take a screenshot of my opening pack, because then when it comes back around, I can kind of see, then I just like cross out whatever cards are missing. So I might just have that in the back of my mind when I'm trying to navigate the rest of the draft. But here it seems like we're not going to wheel anything like too exciting. Let's say we're in an eight player tournament, right? In a team environment, 3 versus 3, you're going to see more cards twice, and that can kind of change things. So here,
yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of like pretty, like there's 4 or 5 strong cards, but there's also quite a few pretty weak cards here, right? Like Burgi, Wild Nakatal, Soulscar Mage, I kind of expect to come back. Even like Deep Forest Hermit probably comes back. Titan of Industry is pretty mid.
Yeah, but this is a good pack because you have the Tinker that has absolute highest power level, but it has some requirements that are not like trivial. So that's why it's cool to talk about. So let's say you're not comfortable, you want like a standalone good card, and then you're going to pick the Fractured Identity or the Remand, right?
I think I'm on Remand. I think I'm on Remand over Fractured by quite a lot at this point.
Okay.
Like, I thought, like, a few years ago, I thought Fractured was just busted and I never passed it. But it just feels like so much of the time at this point, you're dying to, like, 3 drops, and Fractured Identity isn't that good.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, as threats have gotten better and cheaper, the 5-mana card has gotten worse. That's just a good point in general.
No, it makes sense. I guess as well with the Tinker pick, it's kind of the best place to take it is pack 1, pick 1, because you then have the whole draft to build the deck around it and make the most out of it. Yeah,
you have as much time as possible, and your neighbor doesn't know it. So pack 2, you could easily get past like Portal. Let's say this was the team draft, and I had to pass the Tinker because there was like a Mox in the pack. Then I know, okay, I'm not going to pass, let's say, pack 3, I see the Portal, I'm not going to pass that. So Tinker is harder to make work if the opposing team saw it. But in a single-player draft and first pick, perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to completely miss on good targets. Obviously, you can end up with like going in a different direction and not wanting to play it, but it's if you're like in a blue deck with some cheap artifacts, you're not going to miss on like big stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it where some other player opened like Ursa Saga or Academy, and then we're kind of fighting for the same cards, and I didn't get there. Like I've sideboarded a Tinker more than I would like to admit after first picking it. So it is possible, but I agree it's highly likely we get there.
No, it makes sense. Kind of like in the team draft scenario, kind of like, so if we're taking Tinker, kind of like, we are probably putting a person to the left of us on blue with the Remand in the pack. Like, do we care about that because they're on the left of us, or is it kind of just for us to something to be aware of as we're passing the Remand?
Yeah, I think the colors these days are relatively deep. Maybe that's going to make it so that we can't play 85% blue cards in our spell slots. But since we're looking for like artifacts, etc., like artifacts is basically like a color to me. Nobody else is going to want, what do I know, either a spell bomb or whatever cheap artifact that's just like a cog in your deck. So that's totally fine. That's not a problem. But it can be in other scenarios where, let's say we pick Cryptic Command, but we pass 2 other blue cards. Then it can be his thing, right?
No, makes sense. Okay.
Ooh, this is spicy.
This is good.
Right, so we're going to do the next pack. Next we have Usher of the Fallen, Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, Bitter Triumph, Delighted Halfling, Flash, Dismember, Chrome Mox, Blackcleave Cliffs, Talisman of Conviction, Scrubland, Plateau, Robber of the Rich, Misty Rainforest, Haunted Ridge, or Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. This seems, like a very good pack because there's a number of high pick cards here. Kind of, Andreas, what are you leaning towards initially with your first thoughts?
So I think we can pretty quickly narrow my pick down to Flash and Ragavan, but there's a bunch of honorable mentions here. Like, this is a quality pack. I'm never sad to first pick a Misty Rainforest either. I'm a big Dismember fan because it goes in literally any deck. I don't think I've drafted a deck in ages that didn't want to play a Dismember. So the thing about Flash and Ragavan, they're kind of similar in a way that they're kind of hit or miss. They will win X amount of games. They can also be like a mulligan sometimes or a terrible mid-game draw or whatever. Yeah, I'm leaning Flash here. I'm very big on Ragavan. I know actually some other guys on the server are a bit lower on Ragavan. I think it's oftentimes Leyline of win the game. Like you have it in your opener and you win a lot of the time. But yeah, I'm on Flash here. And then, as we talked a little bit about earlier, I'm looking to find either Torsten, Woodfall Primus, Atraxa. What was the other green one? Whirlspine Worm. And then you have stuff like Itali and...
It says Triplicate Titan, if you just
Triplicate
want
Titan is a good shout. That is definitely worth it. And I've also played it with Astral Dragon, actually, lately. So
yeah, that one's really spicy, Astral Dragon. I've liked that one a lot.
My mind blew a few weeks ago. I played... I had Parallax Wave in play. My opponent reanimated Astral Dragon. And then it's like, they make 2 copies of Parallax Wave. And I can't do anything about that because they can just get rid of their dragon. They have 10 counters. So they can just get rid of the dragon and it will come back. And so that's like infinite 3/3s that are Parallax Waves. So I just couldn't figure out what to do. I just quit Magic Online. I went for a walk. I tried to think about like, what on earth could I have done anything? And I don't think so. And then, as fate would have it, like this week I had the exact same. The opponent had a Parallax Wave, and I got to reanimate
nice.
The Astral Dragon. And then my opponent was like, "Is this infinite?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think so." And then he just left the computer. So it's that's a pretty neat interaction. I think it's like you can always end up with 3/3 and then start over, so you can like generate infinite 3/3 flyers that are Parallax Waves. Because the opponent can't get rid of the Parallax Wave. They can get it to 0 counters, but it stays in play. So, yeah, it's a terrible interaction. I think that card is very confusing.
There's someone at Daybreak Games being like, 80% of the time, when Astral Dragon hits a battlefield, someone logs off Magic Online.
Yeah.
We need to cut it.
Yeah, I think the first experience with that card was my opponent copied Jace the Mind Sculptor. So then... And then it was super weird because I could attack it. Like, it's a creature, but I can attack it. And I can kill my opponent's Jace the Mind Sculptor with the Swords of Plowshares. Yeah. And when it takes damage, it loses loyalty. So, and then my question is...
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's super strange. What if I cast Toxic Deluge? Can I then kill the Planeswalker?
Does it then I think so. Loyalty? It's a creature and it dies to having 0 toughness, right?
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, fair enough. So it dies from that. It doesn't lose the loyalty, but it goes to 0 toughness. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's just... like, very confusing card, but also kind of cool. So yeah, I'll take Flash out of this pack. I do like Ragavan a lot, though. And after that, it's Misty, then it's Dismember. And then from there, there's kind of a big drop-off. I guess it's whether you prefer any of those duels.
It's a Downfall or a Dual Land, I guess.
Oh, Bitter Triumph, yeah.
Bitter Triumph, sorry.
Yeah, I like Bitter Triumph a lot. It's like super solid, getting rid of whatever, even like Planeswalker creature. And it can enable Reanimator shenanigans. That card is like super solid. I love those flexible cards. That's what makes Black relevant in my opinion. Because if it's just like Fatal Push Dismember that can only target creatures, kind of has its shortcomings. But a card like Bitter Triumph is that's a good one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like Flash a decent amount more than Ragavan. I think just because like a couple things like Ragavan is like it's good. It's obviously if it's in your opener and they can't answer it, it wins the game. But there are like a decent amount of games where like either it dies or they just like have a lot of creatures early. Like, and it feels like in a lot of matchups you're getting it's on the play you get 1 hit in, on the draw you generally get no hits in. And like obviously it's a very strong card, but Flash is like a card which you can build your whole deck around. You know, there's a lot of ways to tutor for it. Yeah. It can be a whole game plan.
It's very similar to Tinker, actually, in the dynamics where nobody knows you have that Flash, so they're not going to just randomly hate pick some payoff cards. And the payoff cards are oftentimes close to worthless if you don't have Flash. So nobody's going to prioritize them. Nobody's going to say, oh, I'll take this Whirlspine Worm. You never know what's going to happen in the future. Like, you're going to take your broken enabler first, and then take the Whirlspine Worm.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing I'd be noticing out of this pack is where if like Reanimator is definitely a good direction to go from Flash. I think we're very likely to wheel one of these red-black dual lands, which is possibly something we'll be interested in.
We have both a Blackcleave Cliffs and a Haunted Ridge in here, which are not in high demand at all unless you're already black-red. And by the time this pack comes back around. Who knows? Maybe we have like the skeleton of a cool Grixis deck.
Out of interest, kind of, how has Valakut Molten Pinnacle done anything in any cubes you kind of played it in? I want to try it out in mine again as I lower the power level, but kind of like have you seen it do anything with like it is like a fast bond style card with effects that make all of your lands every land type, so kind of like you're infinitely bouncing your lands and stuff.
Yeah, you need either the Dryad or the Prismatic Omen for it to be really good. So you're asking the right person, because I've qualified for the PT plate PT 25 with Valakut. Like, I love Valakut.
No, yeah.
So you're asking the right person, and I don't think it's. I think it's too often like 15th pick rotting in people's sideboard, and then occasionally one of Austrian pro called Emanuel Gershensson, he likes that archetype a lot. Like when he plays like the 64 players, I've seen him do well. But that's like a personal preference of his. Let's say he has a pack like, if you remove Flash and Ragavan from this pack, and he has like what do I know, the Dryad or something, then he's going to take the Dryad, like, because he likes that archetype, and he's a great player, so he can make it work. Like, that's how I see it anyway. But I would imagine the data from Daybreak will tell them that Valakut is in people's sideboard way too often to warrant its inclusion here. Unfortunately, like,
yeah, I think it's like a really cool card when you get there. I had one really sick Valakut deck where they also do the like spelunking fast bond, bounce land stuff, and like Scape Shift was kind of just a decent card in the deck because it's good with spelunking and landfall triggers. But I think it's one of those cards where it's like maybe like probably less than 5% of the time someone will do something fun with it, but like the other 95% of the time it's going to be in the sideboard.
And the cool thing is they have the stats for it, so they're just going to remove it if it's not good enough. Like, there's also the possibility that we just haven't seen it enough. Like, that is a possibility, obviously, that I mean, I can only see what I'm playing against and playing with, right? But I think it's 15th pick too often.
Our final pick one of the day, we have Robber of the Rich, Manifold Key, Soul of Windgrace, Tide Hollow Sculler, Ancestral Recall, Mind's Desire, True Name Nemesis, Mana Drain, Minsk and Boo Timeless Heroes, Shurikai Genesis Engine, Palantir of Orthanc, Sentinel of the Nameless City, Ketra Triome, Valky God of Lies, and finally Reign of Filth. So one of the reasons I thought this was an interesting one to talk about is because obviously this has power in it, but it also has 3 other quite good blue cards and also a Minsk and Boo. So if you were in a specifically like the competitive multiplayer draft, kind of like, is this a similar thing where kind of like you might change your picks because you know what you're going to be passing to an opponent and to your teammate after them?
I don't think this pack quite qualifies, because the specific scenario is basically where you have some colorless cards that's going to improve any deck.
Right. Okay.
So I don't think, but we do have like, we have to be. I mean, I'm going to take Ancestral Recall, but I'm going to have in the back of my mind that I'm passing a Mana Drain, and that's most likely. But that's actually, I don't know about Mana Drain and Minsk and Boo, so we don't really know if my teammate is also blue, which would be kind of bad news. We're really hoping our neighbor takes the Drain, because then they have a blue card with pretty high mana commitment, and we like keep taking good blue cards. They want to stick to this Mana Drain, and that might make their deck worse as a result. But if they just go like, oh, I like Minsk, but I like attacking, then you're making your teammates' deck worse as a result, because they're gonna third pick the Mana Drain. So this is actually a very spicy one, and I think Mana Drain and Minsk are close.
Yeah, I think it's pretty tricky in a Toon draft, right, to know, because your Minsk and Boo and Drain are probably close enough that depending on it will basically entirely depend on their first pick, which one they take.
Yeah.
And you just kind of feel like you have no information about where they're at.
Yeah, this is a great pack for that reason. It has a lot of variance to it, because a lot is going to hinge on whether the opponent takes the Drain or the opponent passes the Drain. Because you're going to pass to them 2/3 of the time, and then they want to stick to their double blue card, and it could end like kind of poorly if you're like really cutting blue. They might like take a few, let's say, bad blue cards to kind of hang in there before maybe giving up. That'll help your team a lot. But yeah, this is a pretty cool pack. Mind's Desire, yeah, I love that card. Those were the days.
out of interest, what do you rate as the, so it's what, Ancestral and then either Minsc and Boo and Mana Drain are kind of second and third. What do you rate as the fourth most powerful card in this pack? Like, is it True Name? Like how good is True Name? Like, in, like, so this is the vintage cube, it doesn't have initiative. I'm assuming True Name is very good in a cube with initiative, but kind of like,
Yeah.
Is that pick 4 or is it like Palantir of Orthanc because it just goes in any deck?
It's pretty close here. So I actually think the Sentinel also should be mentioned here.
Okay. Yeah.
The Sentinel is just like a good standalone card that'll just do a lot of relevant things. Like it blocks very well against aggressive decks. It has to get killed against like controlling mid-range decks. It's just like a very, very solid cards. And if you care about the small artifacts, it's popping out like the map tokens. That can sometimes lead to some even more synergies. But I'm also a big fan of Palantir. For me, it's probably Palantir as the fourth best card. The Palantir, I'm happy to put in any deck, to be honest. Like literally any deck. And sometimes you can even, like if you're like aggressive, it can help you like finish off the opponent. If you're a reanimator, it can help you mill into random stuff. I think that card is awesome. And it goes in any deck. So I would actually say like Palantir and then maybe True Name a bit ahead of Sentinel as the fifth card.
Yeah, I think, Palantir is just so much more flexible. Like, I don't think there's a reason to take the double blue card over the Palantir.
Yeah, they're kind of similar, but you know that card's going to make your deck. That's pretty valuable.
But True Name is great. Like, it's especially against the aggro decks. They have a really hard time with True Name.
To be honest, I like it against more or less anything. Like, I think it's just even against like more controlling decks. It's just like it pressures planeswalkers. Does a lot of good things. But yeah, against aggro, it's great to stabilize, and then once you have stabilized, you can kind of just pick away at their life total. I think that card is some people think it's like unfun because it's hard to interact with, which is like their opinion. I think it's quite cool.
No, definitely. So I'm kind of glad to see that this card is now $2. I remember when this was.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. This was a super expensive card.
When it first came out, I was playing a tournament series called Bazaar of Moxon. Do you remember that?
I don't know, but I do remember the stories of when it came out because it was only in a commander deck.
Yes, it was in a commander deck, and the official release was on Friday, but we traveled to the tournament on Thursday. So what we did was have one of my friends, he was working at the local game store. He would bring like 20 of these to give us on Friday. So we would have them available on release day, and nobody else, like, it was just like so few True Names at this tournament. It was like this was a legacy tournament. It was just a different time, right? Like you have to open these 100 card recons to find this one card you need for your legacy deck, like, and then have a pretty big advantage going into this. It was, I guess, kind of stupid looking back, but we felt like kings of the world back then.
Yeah,
I can imagine. Yeah. I definitely remember hearing stories of people buying the whole precon and then just selling every other card back to the store.
Yeah.
Was True Name the first of the like commander cards to do something in Eternal formats?
Great question.
What was Scavenging Ooze printed in?
Scavenging Ooze was also some commander expansion.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I think so. Scavenging Ooze, I think, was originally printed in. In 2011. Yeah. Sorry, in Commander 2011.
Yeah, of course, it's in a commander set. It would be way too good for standard. That was like because people would be like, which set is this from? And is this standard legal? No. This is modern only. Like that was that's a good one. Scavenging Ooze being like a 2-of or a 3-of in like Jund or Abza Index at the time. Yeah, that was good times as well. But Ancestral Recall, funny thing about that card, Ancestral Recall, I can't remember the name. It doesn't really matter. But some guy made like a pick order, and he had Ancestral Recall like way down, like way below the other power cards, way below stuff like Minsc and Boo and Bowmasters and stuff like that, with the theory that blue is not that great anymore, and dying with a full grip is just like a real thing now, which is true. But for me, like 1 mana is. Like if Ancestral Recall was 3 mana, I see the point, but at 1 mana, I think it's still reasonable to say that you're gonna like out-resource your opponent and can kind of stave off the pressure. You just have to build your deck accordingly, kind of like what we talked about with Library of Alexandria. If you draw into more draw spells, sure, you're gonna lose to aggro, but if you just really prioritize cheap answers, you're gonna be fine.
I think if you're coming in with the assumption that like 1 mana is too much to play to draw your 3 cards, then it leads to a lot of other. It's like A Triome costs 1 mana. That only fixes your mana. You can't play that then.
Exactly. He got a lot of clicks on Twitter with.
Yes, I can imagine.
Yeah, no. I have heard people like in Canadian Highlander where it's like 100 card deck. I've heard that kind of Ancestral Recall isn't as strong as it used to be, but that's kind of you're drawing 3 cards out of 100 card deck in Cube, where in theory there shouldn't really be bad cards in a cube. 1 mana to draw 3 relevant cards is I think it's going to be good for quite a while, to be honest with you.
I'm interested. I only played like 1 tournament of the Canadian Highlander deck, but that's like you have this point system, right? So I guess there's some where, okay, maybe it's not worth as many points as it used to be or something along those lines. And then that's like the context, because so it's whatever it's in the expense of. It's like the give and take situation, I can imagine, where it's things changed with aggressive cards getting better. Like I can definitely see that.
No, 100% makes sense. Last question of the day before we wrap up.
Yep.
So it's this is entirely unrelated to everything we've done so far, but I'm building my own mystery booster draft of like 2,000 cards. What is your favorite draft, common or uncommon, of all time? Because I'll put it in your honor.
Ooh, that is a good one. Can you say a bit more about like the power level or something?
So the strongest card in it is going to be Siege Rhino.
The strongest card is Siege Rhino.
Yeah. So I'm collating the slots like a mystery booster.
That's very cool. I assume you have this card in already. Is Knight's Whisper in?
The black draw spell, I believe so, but I can make sure.
Because that's my favorite Magic card of all time.
Oh, really?
And that sounds like because it's just all I want to be doing in Magic is going land, Mox, Knight's Whisper.
Nice.
That's I'm not greedy. That's all I want to do.
Phenomenal. Well, I'll make sure it's in, and when we draft it, it'll be on your honor. And obviously, if you're in the UK, we'll have to get you down to not just a draft of this, but to draft one of our cubes as well.
Yeah, definitely. That could be awesome.
No, fantastic. Well, yeah, and Andreas, thank you very much for joining us today. Where can people find you on the internet? Yeah,
so thanks so much for having me. Like I had a great time. It's great. We can be grown men talking about Magic all night. That's the sweet life, right?
Exactly.
So I'm ecobaronen on Twitter and ecobaronenMTG on YouTube. I upload daily, mainly Vintage Cube, Vintage, Legacy. There's also I played in a cool a Pauper Band Decks tournament on Card Market. I'm gonna upload some Pauper soon, and just get in there and feel free to shoot me a message. I'm always down to chat about Magic.
I've been liking the draft videos, man. The Vintage Cube videos have been great. Also,
cool.
I like the Twitter Pack One Pick One questions.
Yes. Oof.
Also excellent.
Yeah, definitely. So I did those originally to basically try and learn more about the opposition, because it's so obvious when you make stuff like that people are very colored by, what's like the talk of the town on LZV's videos or whatever. It's pretty cool to see, like, just learn about the opposition. And now it's just like part entertainment, part education for me, I would say. I'm glad you like those as well.
No, that's awesome. Well, yeah, we'll make sure all the links are down in the show notes below. So do go follow Andreas, check him out. James, thank you as well. Pleasure as always.
Thank you. Always fun.
Right, nice one. Well, it just leaves me to thank you out there. Thank you very much for listening. Please follow the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, tell a friend, all that good stuff. Until next time, it's goodbye from the 3 of us, and we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.